I still remember the day my father looked me in the eyes and told me I wasn't really part of the family. His words hung in the air like poison as my stepmother Diana smirked behind him, her manicured hand resting possessively on his shoulder. 25 years I had called this man Dad. 25 years of desperately trying to earn a love that was apparently never mine to claim. All because at the reading of my grandmother's will, I discovered I'd inherited her lakeside cottage, the one Diana had been eyeing for years as her perfect retirement retreat. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and this is the story of how I became invisible in my own family, only to emerge from the shadows when they least expected it. Growing up, I was always Jim's daughter from his first marriage. My mother had died when I was only 4, cancer, swift and merciless, leaving me with faded photographs and borrowed memories. Dad remarried when I was 6, bringing Diana and her son Tyler into our lives. From the beginning, it was clear who the favorites were in our newly blended family. Tyler got the bigger bedroom, the newer bike, the lavish birthday parties. I got hand-me-downs and quiet celebrations with just my dad, when Diana and Tyler were conveniently visiting her parents. It's just until she adjusts to having you around. Dad would whisper when I'd cry about Diana forgetting to call me for dinner or accidentally washing my art project with the laundry. Give her time, Becca. Family takes patience. Family. The word became both my greatest hope and my deepest wound. But I was determined to make it work, to carve out a place for myself in this new reality. I studied hard, joined every extracurricular I could, stayed out of trouble. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, all desperate attempts to be noticed, to be valued. Meanwhile, Tyler coasted through school on charm and my father's connections, dropping out of college twice before Dad bought him a position at his investment firm. He just needs guidance, Dad would say, writing another check to cover Tyler's business expenses that somehow always included weekend trips to Vegas. Despite everything, I managed to put myself through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. No help from Dad, though he paid Tyler's full tuition at 3 different universities. I graduated with honors in architecture, worked my way up at a prestigious firm in Boston, bought my own small apartment. Self-made and proud of it, even if the family I longed to impress barely acknowledged my achievements. Architecture? That's a man's field, Rebecca. Diana sniffed at the dinner announcing my first promotion. I suppose you could always do interior design if it doesn't work out. Tyler laughed. Yeah, Becca can decorate my office when I take over Dad's company. I smiled tightly and changed the subject. I'd learned that defending myself only made me seem difficult and oversensitive. So I swallowed my pride along with the undercooked salmon Diana had prepared, making a mental note to take an antacid later. The years passed in a blur of missed phone calls, shortened holiday visits, and increasingly painful reminders that I existed on the periphery of my father's life. I was invited to family gatherings more out of obligation than desire. I'd arrive with carefully wrapped gifts and rehearse stories of my accomplishments, only to be talked over or dismissed. My successes were minimized, my struggles were ignored. In family photos, I was always positioned at the edge, easy to crop out later, which they often did for the frames that sat prominently in my father's living room. And then came my grandmother's funeral. Gran had always been different. My mother's mother, she had no biological connection to my father, yet she maintained a relationship with him after Mom died, insisting on being part of my life. She was the one who remembered my birthdays without reminders, who called just to ask about my day, who proudly displayed my architectural designs in her small cottage on Lake Winnipesaukee, a peaceful haven where I'd spent precious summers away from Diana's cold gaze. The funeral was small, just as Gran would have wanted. I stood alone near her casket, memories washing over me like gentle waves on the lakeshore. Dad and Diana arrived late, Tyler not bothering to show at all. They made a brief appearance at the reception, accepting condolences as though they'd suffered a great loss, though neither had visited Gran in the 3 years she'd battled heart disease. I'd been the one holding her hand through doctor's appointments, organizing her medications, reading to her when her eyesight began to fail. Such a shame about Martha, Diana said to one of Gran's neighbors, her voice carrying across the quiet funeral home. Though that cottage of hers must be worth a fortune now with all the development around the lake. Jim and I have been thinking about a vacation property. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. 3 days later, we gathered in Mr. Peterson's law office for the reading of Gran's will. Dad looked bored, checking his watch repeatedly. Diana sat expectantly, already mentally redecorating the cottage, I presumed. I just wanted it over with, each minute in their presence reopening wounds I'd tried so hard to heal. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and began reading. Gran had left small mementos to friends and distant relatives. A donation to her church. Her modest savings to be split between several charities. And then, to my granddaughter, Rebecca Mitchell, I leave my cottage on Lake Winnipesaukee and all its contents, with the hope that she finds there the peace and belonging she so richly deserves. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt tears welling in my eyes, not for the property, but for Gran's understanding of what I truly needed, a place to belong. Diana's face contorted with rage. This is ridiculous. We're her family too. Jim, do something. Dad's expression hardened as he looked at me. Did you know about this? Did you convince her to cut us out? The accusation struck like a physical blow.
No.
I had no idea. Gran made her own decisions. Like hell, Diana spat. You've always been manipulative, Rebecca. Always playing the victim. Mr. Peterson intervened, his voice firm. Mrs. Mitchell made her wishes very clear. She specifically updated her will last year to ensure there would be no confusion. He handed me a sealed envelope. She also left this for you, Rebecca. Private correspondence. I clutched the envelope to my chest like armor as we left the office, the weight of my father's disappointment pressing down on me. In the parking lot, Dad grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. This isn't right, Rebecca. That cottage should stay in the family. I pulled away, something breaking inside me. I am family, Dad. Or at least I thought I was. That's when he said it, the words that would change everything between us forever. You're not really part of the family, Rebecca. Not like Diana and Tyler. You're a complication from my past. I've done my duty by you, but that cottage belongs with us. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. All those years of trying to belong, of making myself smaller to fit into the spaces they allowed me, wasted. I'd been fooling myself, believing that someday I'd earn their love, their respect. But in that moment, I saw the truth with devastating clarity. I was never going to be enough. I drove to Gran's cottage, my cottage now, in a daze, tears blurring the familiar route. Inside, I collapsed onto the worn sofa where Gran and I had shared countless cups of tea and conversations. My fingers trembled as I opened her letter. My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, I've gone to join your mother. Don't grieve too long for me. I've had a good life, especially the parts one shared with you. I'm leaving you the cottage because I want you to have a place where you are the undisputed center, not the afterthought. I've watched for years as Jim and that woman have pushed you to the margins of their lives. It breaks my heart to see you try so hard for people who don't deserve your efforts. You may not know this, but your mother left a trust for you. Money Jim was supposed to give you for college. He invested it instead in his business and in Tyler's future. I never told you because I wanted to spare you the pain, and I was afraid it would destroy what little relationship you had with your father. Perhaps that was wrong of me. In the bottom drawer of my desk, you'll find documentation of everything. What you do with this information is entirely your choice. But remember this. You don't need to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Build your life on your terms, sweet girl. The cottage is just the foundation. All my love.
Gran.
My hands shook as I made my way to the antique desk in the corner. The bottom drawer contained a folder thick with documents, bank statements, legal correspondence, a copy of my mother's will. The trust she mentioned was substantial, nearly $500,000 in today's money. Money that should have funded my education, my start in life. Money that had instead gone to my father's business expansion 12 years ago and Tyler's failed startup ventures. They had stolen from me. My own father had stolen my mother's final gift. I sat there for hours, rage and grief warring within me. All those years of working multiple jobs to pay tuition, the crushing student loans I was still paying off, the tiny apartment I could barely afford in Boston, while they lived in luxury built on what was rightfully mine. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls from Dad and Diana, demanding meetings with lawyers, threatening challenges to the will, insisting I do the right thing, and sign over the cottage. I ignored them all, something cold and resolute forming in the pit of my stomach. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to see Mr. Peterson again. He wasn't surprised to see me. "I wondered when you'd find those documents," he said quietly. "Your grandmother consulted me last year about possible legal action. Why didn't she pursue it? She was worried about what it would do to you." Martha believed family was everything, even when they didn't deserve that loyalty. I placed the folder on his desk. "I want everything that's mine. The cottage, the trust money, with interest. All of it." Mr. Peterson smiled for the first time since I'd met him. "I thought you might say that. I've taken the liberty of preparing some options for you." What followed were months of legal proceedings, forensic accounting, and discoveries that shocked even me. My father hadn't just taken my trust fund. He'd systematically diverted assets meant for me throughout my childhood. Insurance money from my mother's death, small inheritances from relatives, even the proceeds from selling our original family home, which should have been partially mine. Throughout it all, Dad and Diana launched a campaign to paint me as the ungrateful daughter, the money-hungry opportunist taking advantage of a confused old woman. They called distant relatives, family friends, even my colleagues. "Rebecca's having some kind of breakdown," they'd say with practiced concern. "She's making up wild accusations. We're so worried about her." But Gran had been meticulous. The evidence was irrefutable. Still, it wasn't enough just to reclaim what was stolen from me. The years of emotional neglect, of being treated as an inconvenience, those damages couldn't be calculated in dollars and cents. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, invisible, insignificant, forgotten. So while the lawyers handled the legal battle, I executed a plan of my own. First, I hired a private investigator to look into my father's business practices. It didn't take long to uncover tax irregularities, misappropriation of client funds, and nepotism that violated company policies. Anonymous tips to the relevant authorities ensured investigations were opened without my name attached. Next, I focused on Diana. Her social standing meant everything to her: the charity boards, the country club membership, the carefully curated image of the perfect wife and mother. Through Gran's connections, I gained access to circles Diana desperately wanted to penetrate. I never spoke ill of her directly, but strategic questions planted doubts. "Oh, Diana Mitchell? I thought her fundraiser money was fully accounted for." "No? How strange." Or, "You're considering her for the board." I assumed after that incident with the hospital donation. Letting sentences trail off, implications hanging in the air. As for Tyler, I didn't have to do much. Without Dad's constant financial bailouts, now impossible as assets were frozen pending investigation, his house of cards collapsed quickly. His drinking problem, previously covered up with private rehab stays, became public knowledge. His position at my father's company became untenable as the investigation revealed he'd been drawing a substantial salary while rarely showing up for work. I watched it all unfold from a distance, renovating the cottage into my dream home, building a small architecture practice specializing in sustainable lakeside properties. Clients flocked to me, drawn by my designs and unaware of the family drama that had financed my new beginning. 6 months into the legal proceedings, Dad called. Not to apologize, but to negotiate. "This has gone far enough, Rebecca," he said, his voice strained. "You've made your point." "Have I? What point would that be, Dad?" "You're hurting the family. Diana's been asked to resign from 2 boards. Tyler's struggling. My business is under scrutiny. Is that what you wanted?" I laughed, the sound foreign even to my own ears. "Family? I thought I wasn't really part of the family." "Those were your words, remember?" "I was upset that day. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did. You've been showing me I didn't matter for 20 years. The only difference is that day you finally said it out loud." Silence stretched between us. "Then, what will it take to end this?" Everything that's mine. Every penny, with interest. Public acknowledgement of what you did. And one more thing.
What?
I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to know what it's like to be erased.
He didn't understand then. He would soon.
The settlement, when it came, was comprehensive. Full restitution of my mother's trust with 20 years of compound interest. Additional damages for the misappropriated insurance money and home sale proceeds. The cottage officially transferred to my name with no conditions or encumbrances. But the legal victory was just the beginning of their downfall. The investigation into my father's business practices resulted in charges for tax evasion and securities fraud. Former clients filed lawsuits. The prestigious firm he'd built over 30 years crumbled in a matter of months. Their house, the sprawling colonial where I'd grown up feeling like an intruder, was seized as part of the settlement of client claims. Diana's carefully constructed social world imploded as the truth emerged about their financial house of cards. The whispers I'd started blossomed into open ostracism. Her friends, the same women who'd ignored me at family events for years, now avoided her calls. Country club membership revoked. Charity board positions filled by others. Holiday party invitations mysteriously lost in the mail. Tyler, unable to coast on my father's reputation and money any longer, finally faced the consequences of his actions. A DUI arrest led to the discovery of outstanding warrants in 2 states for unpaid debts. His girlfriend left, taking their son with her and filing for sole custody based on his unstable behavior and finances. I watched it all from the peaceful shore of Lake Winnipesaukee, building my new life brick by brick, client by client. My designs won awards. My small firm grew. I dated occasionally, but found more satisfaction in my work and in the genuine friendships I formed with neighbors and colleagues, people who valued me for who I actually was, not for what I could give them or how I made them look. Then came the wedding invitation. My cousin Ellie, Dad's niece, was getting married. We'd been close as children, but had drifted apart during my years of family exile. The invitation surprised me, addressed specifically to me, with a handwritten note. I miss you, Becca. It wouldn't be right without you there. I almost declined. The thought of facing the extended family, of hearing the whispers about the scandal, made my stomach churn. But then I thought of Gran's words. Build your life on your terms. Hiding away at the cottage wasn't building anything. It was just another form of letting them dictate my choices. So I RSVP'd yes, bought a stunning midnight blue gown that cost more than I would have spent on 3 months of groceries in my struggling college days, and booked a suite at the venue's luxury hotel. The weekend of the wedding arrived, crisp October air painting the New England landscape in brilliant reds and golds. I drove to the Vineyard estate with a strange calm replacing the anxiety I'd expected. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my place, not in their family but in my own life narrative. The rehearsal dinner was the first test. As I entered the rustic barn transformed with twinkling lights and flowing white fabric, conversation stuttered to a halt. Eyes turned to me, some curious, some wary, some frankly assessing my designer dress and the subtle confidence that financial security had given me. I held my head high, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and moved toward Ellie. My cousin broke into a genuine smile, breaking away from her fiancé to embrace me.
Becca.
You came. God, you look amazing. So, do you, I said, meaning it. Happiness suits you. I wasn't sure you'd come after everything. She lowered her voice. Uncle Jim and Diana are here. And Tyler. I figured they would be. It's okay, Ellie. This is your weekend. I won't cause a scene. Relief softened her features. Thank you. For what it's worth, a lot of us always thought they treated you terribly.
We just didn't know how to say it.
The admission was both balm and salt to old wounds. Water under the bridge, I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. Throughout the evening, relatives approached cautiously. Some offered awkward conversations about the weather and my lovely cottage. Others were more direct. We heard what Jim did with your mother's money. Disgraceful. A few apologized for not seeing what was happening, for not intervening. I accepted their words with grace, neither absenting them of responsibility nor holding them accountable for my father's actions. Dad, Diana, and Tyler kept their distance, huddled at a corner table like survivors of a shipwreck. They looked smaller somehow. Dad had aged a decade in the year since our confrontation, his shoulders stooped, his once commanding presence diminished. Diana's designer clothes had been replaced by department store finds, her jewelry noticeably less ostentatious. Tyler's handsome face was bloated from drinking, his charm curdled into something bitter and offensive. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. My presence, successful, composed, thriving, said everything. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. I took my time getting ready, savoring the luxury of the suite, ordering room service breakfast, having my hair professionally styled. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, with cocktails and dinner to follow. I arrived at the venue garden to find my name card placed at a table far from the main wedding party, alongside distant relatives and friends of friends. For a moment, old insecurities threatened to surface. Then I smiled. This wasn't Ellie's doing. This had Diana's fingerprints all over it. She must have volunteered to help with the seating arrangements. Instead of taking my assigned seat, I found the wedding coordinator, a harried young woman with a tablet and a headset. "Excuse me, there seems to be a mistake with my seating assignment," I said pleasantly. "I'm Rebecca Mitchell, the bride's first cousin." The coordinator checked her tablet. "Mitchell, yes, you're at table 19. That can't be right. Table 19 is in the back corner, by the kitchen entrance. I'm immediate family." She frowned, scrolling through her notes. "I have here that Mrs. Diana Mitchell handled the family seating and specifically placed you at 19. "I see. And who approved the final seating chart? Ellie, I presume?" "Well, yes, but could you check with her, please? I'd hate to cause any confusion during her special day." The coordinator hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." She returned minutes later with Ellie, resplendent in her wedding gown.
Becca.
"What's wrong?" Ellie asked. "Just a small seating mix-up. Diana apparently put me at table 19. Ellie's expression darkened. "She did what?" "She offered to help with the chart, but I never— God, I'm so sorry." She turned to the coordinator. "Move Rebecca to table 2 with my parents and my closest cousins. And find new placement cards for Uncle Jim, Diana, and Tyler. Put them at 19. The coordinator's eyes widened. "Are you sure? The ceremony starts in 30 minutes. "I'm sure. This is my wedding, and I want my family where they belong." As guests were guided to their seats for the ceremony, I caught Diana's eye across the garden. She blanched as she realized what had happened, grabbing my father's arm and whispering furiously in his ear. He looked in my direction, his expression a complex mixture of anger and what might have been shame. The ceremony was beautiful. Ellie and her new husband exchanged heartfelt bows as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. During the reception, I danced with the bride's father, my uncle, and with several cousins I hadn't seen in years. I ate at table 2, sharing stories and laughter with family members who seemed genuinely interested in my life, my work, my plans for the cottage. From my prime position, I could see Dad, Diana, and Tyler at their banished table near the kitchen doors, servers constantly brushing past them with trays and carts. Diana sat rigid with humiliation. Dad stared into his whiskey glass. Tyler got progressively drunker, eventually making a scene that required 2 groomsmen to escort him outside. I felt no satisfaction in their discomfort. No vindication. Only a strange, peaceful detachment. They no longer had the power to hurt me, not because I'd hurt them back, but because I finally understood my worth had never depended on their validation. As the evening wound down, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet, the October air cool against my skin. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find my father, looking older than his 62 years. "Nice evening," he said awkwardly. "It is. Ellie makes a beautiful bride." He nodded, shoving his hands in his pockets. "You look well. The cottage must agree with you." "It does." Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he sighed. I don't suppose there's any chance we could start over? Try to be some kind of family again. I studied his face, the face I'd once searched for approval, for love, for any sign that I mattered. What kind of family would that be, Dad? The kind where I forgive everything and pretend it never happened? The kind where I'm grateful for whatever scraps of attention you decide to throw my way? That's not fair, Rebecca. No, it's not. None of it was fair. Not what you did with Mom's money. Not how you treated me my entire life. Not how you let Diana and Tyler push me out of the family. None of it was fair. He looked away. I made mistakes. Terrible ones. But you've had your revenge. You've taken everything. Is that what you think this was about? Revenge? I shook my head. This was about justice, Dad. About finally claiming what was mine, not just the money, but my dignity. My right to exist without apology. And now? What happens now? I considered the question carefully. Now I live my life. I build my business. I make my own family from people who value me. And us? Diana and me? Tyler? That's up to you. I don't need you in my life anymore. I don't need your approval, or your love, or your acceptance. If you want to be part of my life, it has to be on equal terms. No more pretending. No more lies. He nodded slowly. I don't know if I know how to do that. Then I guess we have our answer. I turned to go back inside, but his voice stopped me. Your mother would be proud of you, Rebecca. She always said you had her backbone. For the first time in our conversation, I heard sincerity in his voice. Perhaps the first truly sincere thing he'd said to me in decades. Thank you, I said simply, and returned to the reception. I left the next morning, declining the post-wedding brunch in favor of the 3-hour drive back to the lake. As I navigated the winding roads of New Hampshire, I reflected on the weekend. Not just the satisfaction of seeing Diana's scheme backfire, but the genuine connections re-established with extended family, the realization that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. When I reached the cottage, my cottage, I kicked off my shoes and walked down to the dock, watching the sunlight dance across the water. Gran had been right. This was my foundation. Not just the property itself, but what it represented. A place where I belonged unconditionally, a legacy of love rather than obligation. In the year that followed, I expanded my architecture practice, hiring 2 associates to help with the increasing workload. I renovated the cottage, modernizing the interior while preserving its character. I joined the Lake Conservation Board and the local historical society. I built a life rich with purpose and authentic connections. Dad called occasionally, awkward conversations that rarely lasted more than 10 minutes. Diana refused to speak to me. Tyler, after hitting rock bottom, entered rehab and sent a 12-step apology letter that seemed sincere, if overdue. I accepted it with cautious optimism, but maintained firm boundaries. 2 years after the reading of Gran's will, the day that changed everything, I hosted a housewarming party at the fully renovated cottage. Among the guests were neighbors, colleagues, clients, and yes, some family members. Ellie and her husband. 2 cousins who had reached out after the wedding. Even my uncle, Dad's brother, and his wife, who had finally seen my father for who he truly was. Dad declined the invitation. I hadn't really expected him to come. As twilight fell, we gathered on the expanded deck overlooking the lake. Someone proposed a toast, raising a glass to Rebecca, who showed us all what resilience really means. I smiled, surveying the faces around me, people who saw me, who valued me, who chose to be in my life as I chose to be in theirs. This was family, not by blood or obligation, but by choice and respect. Later, after the guests had gone, I sat alone on the dock, feet dangling in the cool lake water. I thought about the invisible girl I'd been, desperately seeking validation from people incapable of providing it. I thought about the woman I'd become, standing firmly in her power, comfortable in her own skin. The cottage lights reflected on the water's surface, rippling with a gentle evening breeze. Not so different from me, I realized. What had once been easily disturbed now returned quickly to its natural state, stronger for having weathered the storms. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen. I was home, and that was justice enough.